A chance encounter that changed everything. Officer Ethel Davis drove down the quiet streets of Rosewood, a small town nestled between rolling hills and dense oak forests. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting golden hues over the town, bathing the streets in a peaceful glow. Despite the calm, Ethel had spent 23 years patrolling these roads, and she knew that darkness often concealed pain, loss, and loneliness in ways daylight never could. She sighed, adjusting her rearview mirror. The lines on her face had deepened over the years, and strands of gray now streaked her once jet-black hair. The weight of years in uniform, of tragedies witnessed and burdens carried, settled on her shoulders. Retirement loomed, but she wasn't ready. Not yet. She glanced at the worn photo tucked into her dashboard. A picture of Michael, her son. His bright smile, curly hair, and mischievous eyes stared back at her. It had been 5 years since he had been taken from her in a hit-and-run accident, and the pain still clung to her like a second skin. Some losses never heal. A sudden movement caught her eye. A tiny figure stood in the nearly empty parking lot of Evergreen Grocery Store, clutching something in her arms. Ethel's instincts flared. A child. Alone. She pulled into the lot, parking a few feet away to avoid startling her. Stepping out, Ethel adjusted her badge and approached slowly, her voice gentle. "Hey there, sweetheart. Are you okay?" The little girl clutched a worn-out teddy bear, her tiny hands gripping it tightly, as if it were a lifeline. She couldn't have been more than 4. Her skin was a deep, warm brown, her hair styled into short, delicate braids adorned with colorful beads. The girl's eyes were wide and filled with something Ethel recognized immediately. Fear. "What's your name, Pawnee?" Ethel asked, kneeling down to her level. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, a whisper. "Amara." Ethel offered a warm smile. "That's a beautiful name, Amara. Where's your mommy or daddy? Are they inside the store?" At this, Amara's lip quivered. Tears welled in her big brown eyes before she mumbled the words that would shake Ethel to her core. "Mommy doesn't want me anymore." Ethel's breath caught. Her chest tightened as she processed the words. 1,000 thoughts flooded her mind. A misunderstanding, a lost child, a mother who would come running any moment now. But deep down, she knew better. She reached out gently, offering her hand. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure that's not true. Let's figure this out together, okay?" Amara hesitated, then took Ethel's hand. Her tiny fingers were cold. Ethel's mind was already shifting into protection mode. There was no sign of a frantic mother, no one searching, no cars parked nearby that might belong to family. She was alone. And someone had left her here. A past that haunts, a future uncertain. The patrol car hummed softly as Officer Ethel Davis drove through the quiet streets of Rosewood, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few moments. Amara, the 4-year-old girl she had found alone in the parking lot, sat curled in the back seat, silent, gripping her teddy bear tightly. Her small fingers clutched the stuffed animal with a desperation that twisted something deep inside Ethel's heart. The little girl's dark eyes, filled with confusion and sadness, stared out the window as the world passed her by. Ethel had seen her fair share of neglect, abandonment, and heartache in her years as a police officer, but something about Amara was different. This wasn't just a case. This was a child, fragile and lost, and somehow, Ethel knew this moment would change both of their lives forever. She cleared her throat, keeping her voice soft. "Sweetheart, do you know where your mommy went?" For a moment, Amara didn't answer. She just hugged her bear tighter. Then, in a barely audible whisper, she murmured. She drove away. Ethel's hands clenched the steering wheel. Drove away. A mother doesn't just drive away and leave her baby alone in a parking lot. A deep, familiar ache coiled in Ethel's chest. She forced herself to stay calm. "Do you know your address, honey? Where you live?" Amara shook her head, the colorful beads in her braids clicking softly. "Mommy says we move a lot. We don't have a home." Ethel swallowed hard. Homeless, or running. Her gut twisted. If Amara's mother had willingly abandoned her, this wasn't just neglect. It was something deeper. The thought made her stomach churn. She flicked on her radio. Dispatch, this is Officer Davis. I have a 4-year-old found alone at Evergreen Grocery. No guardian present. Running her name now. The radio crackled. Copy that, Officer Davis. Send us the child's full name. Ethel glanced back. Amara, sweetheart, do you know your last name? The little girl hesitated. Then she said quietly, Mommy says it's Pierce, but sometimes she says Miller. Ethel's chest tightened. That wasn't normal. She relayed the name over the radio, but her gut already told her what she would find, or rather, what she wouldn't. And she was right. After a few long moments, the radio crackled back to life. No records found under Amara Pierce or Miller in the local database, Officer Davis. No missing child reports either. Ethel's pulse quickened. No missing report. No frantic mother searching. Something wasn't right. She pulled into the Rosewood police station, parked the car, and turned to Amara with a warm smile. Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you something warm to eat, okay? The little girl hesitated but finally nodded, unbuckling her seatbelt with small, delicate fingers. Ethel reached out instinctively, taking her hand as they walked inside. Her grip was so tiny, so cold, as if she had been holding on to something that was slipping away. Inside the station, a new mystery unfolds. The warmth of the police station was a stark contrast to the cold loneliness of the parking lot. A few officers glanced up as Ethel walked in, their eyes widening at the sight of the tiny girl gripping her hand. Sergeant Mason Carter, a gruff but kind-hearted man with salt and pepper hair, met them at the front desk. Davis, what have you got? His gaze dropped to Amara, softening slightly. Who's this? This is Amara, Ethel said, leading the little girl to a nearby chair. She was found alone in the grocery store parking lot. No sign of a guardian, no missing persons report, and she lowered her voice. Something doesn't sit right about this. Mason rubbed his jaw. Dan. He knelt in front of Amara, his voice gentler than usual. Hey, sweetheart. I'm Sergeant Carter. You doing okay? Amara barely acknowledged him. She simply swung her legs back and forth, her tiny sneakers barely brushing the floor, holding on to her teddy bear like it was the only thing in the world keeping her safe. That kind of silence. Ethel had seen it before. It wasn't just shyness. It was fear. She straightened. I'm running a background check on the mother. The name Amara gave me doesn't show up in any local records, but I have a feeling we're dealing with more than just abandonment. Mason sighed. Let me know what you find. He nodded toward Amara. And in the meantime, let's get the kid something warm. She looks frozen. Dinner and the first clue. A few minutes later, Amara sat in the break room, a plate of chicken tenders and mashed potatoes in front of her. She picked at her food, her appetite uncertain, hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to eat. Ethel sat beside her, nursing a cup of coffee. You can eat as much as you want, sweetheart, she said softly. Amara's dark eyes flicked up to her. For real? Ethel nodded. For real. The little girl hesitated, then took a tiny bite. Then another. Slowly, the hunger took over, and soon she was eating like she hadn't had a proper meal in days. That told Ethel more than words ever could. As Amara chewed, she suddenly stopped and reached into her small coat pocket. Then, to Ethel's surprise, she pulled out a crumpled-up piece of paper and set it on the table. Mommy left this in the car before she drove away, she whispered. Ethel's breath hitched. She unfolded the paper carefully. Scrawled in hurried, messy handwriting were 5 words that made Ethel's blood run cold. She's safer without me. I'm sorry. Ethel's hands tightened around the paper. A shiver ran through her. This wasn't just abandonment. This was desperation. Regret. A mother who believed she was doing what was best by disappearing. But why? She turned to Amara, a new wave of determination flooding through her. She had no intention of letting this little girl disappear into the system. She was going to find out what happened to Amara's mother. And more than that, she was going to make sure Amara was never left alone again. The truth that no one wanted to face. The words on the crumpled note stared back at Ethel like a ghost from the past. She's safer without me. I'm sorry. Her fingers clenched around the fragile paper, the weight of those words sinking into her chest. It wasn't just an apology, it was a surrender. A mother had given up on herself, on her child, on everything. But why? Ethel turned her attention back to Amara, who sat on the station's breakroom chair, swinging her tiny legs. The little girl had devoured her food, the plate now wiped clean, and yet she sat with an uneasy stillness. Not the kind of stillness children usually had. The kind of stillness of a child who had been trained not to make noise, not to be noticed. Ethel knew that feeling well. Taking a deep breath, she set the note down and softened her voice. Amara, sweetheart, can you tell me where your mommy was going? Amara fidgeted with the frayed ear of her teddy bear, eyes darting toward the door as if she expected someone to burst in and snatch her away. Mommy said we had to leave, she murmured. She was scared. Scared. Ethel's instincts sharpened. This wasn't just a case of a struggling single mother. This was something much bigger. She gently reached for Amara's small hand, giving it a comforting squeeze. What was she scared of, honey? Amara's lips trembled. Her tiny shoulders shrunk inward, the way someone does when they expect to be scolded for speaking. The man, she finally whispered. Ethel's blood ran cold. The missing pieces. After settling Amara in the quietest corner of the station with a blanket and some crayons, Ethel returned to her desk, her fingers flying across the keyboard. If Amara's mother, Ms. Pierce or Miller, had been running from someone, there had to be a record. A domestic violence report, a restraining order, a police report, something. But just like before, nothing came up under either name. No missing persons report. No known relatives. No history of arrests or citations. It was as if Amara and her mother didn't exist at all. Ethel frowned, rubbing her temple. This wasn't right. Even if they had moved around a lot, there should have been something. A rental lease, a utility bill, an old employment record. She picked up the crumpled note again, rereading the words. She's safer without me. Safer from what? Her gut told her this wasn't just a mother abandoning her child out of neglect. This was fear, desperation. A woman who thought leaving was the only way to keep her daughter safe, and Ethel was going to find out why. She pushed away from her desk, heading toward Sergeant Carter's office. The door was slightly ajar, and she didn't bother knocking before stepping inside. "We have a problem, Mason." Sergeant Carter, who had been halfway through his third cup of coffee, glanced up, sighing. "Davis, you always bring me problems." "What now?" Ethel dropped the crumpled note onto his desk. "We're not dealing with a simple case of abandonment. Amara's mother was running from someone." Carter's brow furrowed as he picked up the note, reading it over. "You sure?" Ethel folded her arms. The kid's terrified. She mentioned a man. Someone her mom was afraid of. And get this. No records. No last known address. Nothing. It's like they were ghosts. Carter let out a slow exhale, tapping the note against his desk. "If that's the case, we need to be careful. If the mother was running from someone, they might be looking for the girl too." The weight of his words settled between them like a dark cloud. Ethel hated the thought. Had she just walked into something far more dangerous than she realized? Before she could answer, the station phone rang. Carter picked it up, his expression shifting the second he heard the voice on the other end. His eyes flicked to Ethel. "Davis, this one's for you." Ethel's pulse quickened as she took the receiver. Officer Davis speaking. The voice on the other end was sharp, male, controlled, but with an edge that made Ethel's skin crawl. "I heard you found a little girl at the grocery store." the man said smoothly. Every hair on the back of Ethel's neck stood on end. She gripped the receiver tighter. "Who is this?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, he simply said, "That child doesn't belong to you, Officer Davis." And then the line went dead. The threat that can't be ignored. Ethel stood frozen, the dial tone humming in her ear. Something wasn't just wrong. This was bad. She slammed the phone down, turning to Carter. "Someone knows we have Amara, and they're watching." Mason's face hardened. He reached for his radio. "I want a trace on that call. Now." Ethel's stomach twisted. This wasn't some ordinary missing child case. Someone out there wanted Amara, and they were willing to make threats to get her back. She rushed back to the break room, her heart pounding. Amara was still there, humming softly as she colored, her little hands moving across the paper in soft strokes of blue and green. She looked so small, so unaware of the danger that had just brushed against them. Ethel knelt beside her, forcing a calm smile. "Hey, sweetheart. You okay?" Amara nodded, holding up her drawing. "I drew a house. I never had one before." Ethel's heart squeezed. A child who had never had a home, a mother who disappeared in fear, and a man on the other end of the phone, warning her to stay out of it. She looked into Amara's big brown eyes and knew she couldn't walk away from this. No matter what it took, she was going to find Amara's mother, and she was going to protect this little girl with everything she had. The motel room of secrets. The sound of the dead phone line echoed in Ethel's ears long after the caller had hung up. "That child doesn't belong to you, Officer Davis." The words coiled around her like a noose. Who was that? How did they know about Amara? And more importantly, what did they want with her? Ethel wasn't about to sit back and wait for answers to come to her. She had spent too many years watching kids fall through the cracks, victims of a system that failed them, of adults who abandoned them. Not this time. She knelt beside Amara, who was still coloring, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. "Sweetheart," Ethel said softly, brushing a curl from the little girl's forehead. "I need to ask you something important, okay?" Amara's small fingers paused on the crayon. She looked up with wide, dark eyes, her lips pressing together. She was hesitant, like she had been taught not to speak too much. Ethel forced a reassuring smile. "You said you and your mommy move a lot. Do you remember the last place you stayed before she brought you to the grocery store?" For a long moment, silence. Amara fidgeted, rubbing the ear of her stuffed teddy bear, eyes darting toward the door as if expecting someone to come take her away. Then finally, in a whisper, she said, "The Bluebird Motel." A name that meant trouble. Ethel's breath hitched. The Bluebird Motel. The name alone sent a chill down her spine. It was a rundown place on the outskirts of Rosewood, a hotspot for trouble. Drug dealers, fugitives, and people who didn't want to be found. Not the kind of place a mother and daughter should have been staying. And yet that was where Amara and her mother had been. Ethel stood up, her decision made. She wasn't waiting for the department to drag their feet on this investigation. She was going to the motel herself. "Sergeant Carter," she called out as she passed his office. He glanced up, raising an eyebrow. "You got something." "I have a lead. The last place Amara and her mom stayed before she disappeared. The Bluebird Motel." Carter frowned, his instincts flaring just as hers had. "That's not a good place to go alone, Davis." Ethel smirked, grabbing her jacket and radio. "You worried about me, old man." Carter rolled his eyes. "I'd rather not have to explain to the chief why my best officer went missing because she was too stubborn to wait for backup." "I'll be careful," Ethel promised. "But we both know how this works. If I don't move fast, whoever was looking for Amara's mother will cover their tracks." Carter sighed, rubbing his temples. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. "Fine. Take Officer Reynolds with you, and Davis." She turned back. "Watch your damn back." The Bluebird Motel. The drive to the motel felt longer than it should have. The further she got from the heart of Rosewood, the more dilapidated the streets became. Cracked pavement, broken streetlights, and the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, but suffocating. The Bluebird Motel stood at the edge of town like a forgotten relic from another era. The neon sign flickered weakly, missing half its letters so that it only read, Bird in OT. A few beat-up cars were parked out front, the kind of cars that hadn't been registered in years. Ethel's gut twisted. This was the kind of place people checked into when they had nowhere else to go, or when they were running. She pulled into the lot, her partner, Officer Reynolds, stepping out of the passenger seat. He was younger than her, fresh-faced and eager, but smart enough to know when to shut up and follow her lead. "Stay close," Ethel muttered as they approached the front office. "And don't touch anything." Reynolds nodded, his hand hovering near his holster. Inside, the motel clerk barely looked up from his tiny TV, chewing on the stub of an old cigarette. Ethel pulled out her badge. "Officer Davis, RPD. We need information about a guest." The man barely blinked. "I don't keep records." Ethel gave him a flat look. "Don't insult me. You have a check-in log. I just need the last room rented by a woman with a small child." The clerk scratched his stubbled chin. "Lady with a kid." For a moment, he seemed like he might lie. But then, his eyes darted to the security camera in the corner, blinking red. He sighed. "Room 12. But they checked out 3 days ago. Paid in cash." Ethel nodded. "Give me the key." The man hesitated. "You need a warrant for that." Ethel leaned in slightly. "And you need a health inspector to take a real close look at this dump. Want to test who moves faster." The clerk grumbled but reached under the counter, pulling out a rusted key on a plastic tag. Ethel grabbed it. "Thanks. Stay here. Room 12. The last place they were seen." The door to room 12 creaked as she unlocked it. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of old cigarettes and cheap bleach. The bed was still messy, the sheets crumpled as if someone had left in a hurry. Ethel's stomach twisted. Something had happened here. She motioned for Reynolds to check the bathroom while she moved toward the nightstand. The drawers were empty. No ID, no bags, nothing left behind. But then, something near the trash can caught her eye. A ripped piece of paper, tucked partially under the bed. She knelt, pulling it out carefully. Her pulse quickened as she read the words. "If something happens, don't let him take her. Amara is not safe." Ethel's breath hitched. She barely had time to process the message before Reynolds called out from the bathroom. "Davis, you're gonna want to see this." She rushed in, her boots echoing on the tiles. Reynolds pointed to the sink. There, scrawled in hurried lipstick, was a message on the mirror. "He found me. I have to run." Ethel's pulse thundered. Who the hell was he? And how far had Amara's mother gone to escape? One thing was certain. She was still in danger, and whoever was chasing her wasn't far behind. Shadows in the rearview mirror. The lipstick message on the motel mirror burned into Ethel's mind. "He found me. I have to run." A cold, sinking feeling settled in her gut. Amara's mother wasn't just running. She was fleeing for her life. And now, Ethel was caught in the middle. Her eyes flicked back to the ripped piece of paper clutched in her hand, the words barely legible from smudged ink and frantic handwriting. "If something happens, don't let him take her. Amara is not safe." Ethel's grip on the paper tightened. Not safe from who? Reynolds, still standing by the motel bathroom door, shifted uncomfortably. "Davis, this isn't just an abandonment case, is it?" Ethel exhaled, pocketing the note. "No, it's not. And if we don't figure out what's going on fast, Amara's mother might not make it out of this alive." An unwanted tale. The ride back to the Rosewood police station was supposed to be a straight shot down the highway. But the moment Ethel pulled onto the road, her instincts screamed at her. The SUV was behind her. Black. Tinted windows. Driving just a little too carefully. It had been sitting in the motel parking lot when she and Reynolds left. And now, it was keeping pace. Someone was watching. Someone didn't want her digging too deep. Ethel's fingers tightened around the wheel, her heart pounding steadily against her ribs. She had been a cop for 23 years, long enough to know when someone was following her. She took a slow breath. Think, Davis. If they were watching her, that meant they knew she was getting close. And that meant Amara was in danger. Ethel's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The SUV was still there. She needed to shake them. Fast. Reynolds, she muttered, keeping her voice steady. Don't turn around. But we've got a tail. Reynolds, to his credit, didn't panic. Black SUV. Ethel's lips pressed into a thin line. Yep. Think they're just watching or waiting to make a move. I don't plan to wait and find out. She reached for the police radio, keeping her voice controlled. Dispatch, this is Officer Davis. I need an unmarked unit to trail a black SUV. Plate number. She glanced at her mirror, squinting to catch the digits. 5G8YT2. Suspected surveillance and possible threat. The radio crackled. Copy, Davis. Nearest unit is 2 minutes out. Keep eyes on them. 2 minutes. Ethel had been in the field long enough to know 2 minutes was an eternity if someone wanted to make a move. And she was right. Because the moment she pulled up to a red light, the SUV's engine revved loudly behind her. And then, it lurched forward, straight toward the back of her cruiser, the hit that changed everything. The world tilted violently as the impact slammed through the patrol car. Glass shattered, metal groaned, tires screeched. Ethel's hands tightened on the wheel as the force of the hit sent her skidding sideways, narrowly missing a lamppost. She heard Reynolds curse loudly beside her. The SUV didn't stop. Instead, it tore away, speeding down the highway like a bat out of hell. Ethel gritted her teeth and threw the car into drive. Hold on, Reynolds. She was going after them. The cruiser's tires squealed as she accelerated, her focus narrowing in on the fleeing SUV. Whoever they weren't getting away that easy. She slammed the radio button. Dispatch, suspect just rammed my vehicle. We are in pursuit heading west on Highway 6. Request backup immediately. The radio crackled again. Copy, Officer Davis. Units en route. But Ethel knew she had to keep eyes on them until backup arrived. The SUV swerved dangerously between cars, its driver desperate to escape. Ethel kept close, her heart hammering. Who the hell were these people? And more importantly, what did they want with Amara? The chase ends in fire. The SUV tried to take a hard right turn onto a side road. Too fast. The back tires skidded. The driver overcorrected. And then, crash. The vehicle slammed into a street barrier, its back end lifting off the ground for a terrifying moment before landing with a sickening thud. Ethel skidded to a stop, reaching for her gun as she threw open the driver's side door. Reynolds, cover me. Reynolds was already out, weapon drawn, moving to her side. The SUV's driver's side door creaked open. A man stumbled out, his face obscured by a hood, clutching his right arm, which was bent at an unnatural angle. Ethel stepped forward, gun raised. Hands where I can see them, she commanded. The man didn't listen. Instead, he bolted. Ethel cursed under her breath and sprinted after him. The suspect was fast, ducking between alleys and cutting through abandoned lots, but Ethel was faster. She had chased down drug dealers, gang members, and desperate criminals before, and she sure as hell wasn't letting this one get away. The moment he tried to vault over a chain-link fence, Ethel launched herself forward, grabbing the back of his hoodie and yanking him down. They both hit the ground hard, but Ethel recovered first. She twisted the suspect's arm behind his back, pressing her knee between his shoulder blades. "You're not going anywhere," she growled. The man struggled for a moment, but when Ethel tightened her hold, he stilled. "Who are you?" she demanded, Why are you following me? What do you want with Amara? For a moment, there was silence. And then, a low chuckle. It sent a shiver down Ethel's spine. The man turned his head slightly, enough for her to see the twisted smirk on his face. You don't know what you've walked into, officer, he murmured. Ethel's grip tightened. Try me. The man's smile didn't fade. Instead, he whispered something that made her blood turn ice cold. It's not just her mother we want. It's the girl. Amara belongs to us. Ethel's breath caught. What the hell did that mean? Who was us? Before she could press him for more, he twisted suddenly, slamming his head backward into her nose, sending a sharp burst of pain through her skull. In the split second it took her to recover, he was already on his feet, sprinting away. Ethel reached for her gun, aiming. But then a car screeched around the corner, another black SUV. The man dove into the passenger seat, and before Ethel could even react, the vehicle sped away, leaving her alone, breathless, and with far more questions than answers. The woman who vanished. Ethel's heart pounded as the taillights of the black SUV disappeared into the night. They were organized, dangerous, and worse, fearless. They weren't just some goons looking to grab a kid. This was something bigger, something deeper. And now, they knew her name, her face, and that she was standing in their way. Damn it. Ethel wiped the blood from her busted lip, her breathing heavy as she stared at the empty street, where her suspect had vanished into the night. A slow chill crawled down her spine. It's not just her mother we want. It's the girl. Amara belongs to us. What the hell did that mean? A single thought burned in her mind. She needed to find Amara's mother, and fast. Because whoever these people were, they weren't done. And the next time they came looking, they wouldn't fail. The last known location. Back at the Rosewood police station, Ethel threw open the case file. Every piece of evidence sprawled across her desk. Amara's last known stay, the Bluebird Motel, the lipstick message on the mirror. He found me. I have to run. The crumpled note left in Amara's pocket. She's safer without me. And now, the mysterious black SUVs shadowing her every move. It didn't add up. If Amara's mother had been running, why hadn't she contacted the police? Why hadn't she reported someone chasing her? Unless she didn't trust the police. Or worse, she knew they wouldn't be able to help her. Ethel stared at the motel records again. Paid in cash. No ID. But there was one clue she hadn't looked into yet. A security camera. The motel clerk had mentioned it, and Ethel had been too caught up in the rushed investigation to demand the footage. She grabbed her keys, shoving her gun into its holster. Where are you going? Mason Carter's voice stopped her at the station doors. Ethel turned, jaw tight, back to the motel. Carter frowned, stepping closer. Davis, you were just run off the Dan Road. Maybe sit this one out before you end up in a ditch. Ethel shook her head. I don't have time to sit this one out, Mason. These people, whoever they are, they want that little girl. And I don't plan on letting them have her. Carter sighed. At least take backup. She hesitated, but then nodded. Fine. You coming? Carter smirked. If I let you go alone, you'll just break 3 laws and piss someone off. Let's go. The truth in the footage. They arrived back at the Bluebird Motel under the cover of night. The dimly lit parking lot was empty, except for the clerk inside, watching an old boxing match on a tiny TV. When Ethel and Carter walked in, he groaned. Come on, lady, I already gave you the room number. What now? Ethel slapped her badge on the counter. The security footage. The clerk rolled his eyes but didn't argue. He turned to the dusty old monitor behind him, rewinding the footage from 3 nights ago. Ethel's breath caught as the grainy black and white video flickered to life. A woman appeared on the screen, standing at the front desk. Her hair was wild and unkempt, her coat too thin for the cold weather, and in her arms, Amara. She looked exhausted, terrified. She kept looking over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. Then Ethel saw it. A black SUV parked at the far end of the lot. The woman glanced toward it, her body visibly shaking before she grabbed the motel key and hurried to room 12. Ethel's stomach clenched. She knew she was being followed. Carter exhaled beside her. She was running from someone. Ethel's eyes never left the screen. Then, at 4:17 a.m., movement. The woman emerged from the room, still clutching Amara. But something was different now. She was crying. No, sobbing. She paced near the car, her body rigid with panic, before she bent down and slipped a piece of paper into Amara's pocket. Ethel's breath hitched. The note. The one that said Amara wasn't safe. Then the woman kissed her daughter's forehead and walked away. Without her, she left Amara sitting alone in the parking lot. By the time the cameras picked up Amara again, she was curled up on the pavement, hugging her teddy bear, watching as her mother's car disappeared into the night. Ethel's chest tightened. Carter shook his head. She didn't just abandon her, Davis. She was protecting her. Whatever she was running from, she figured Amara was safer alone than with her. But from who? And where the hell was Amara's mother now? Ethel straightened. She had to go somewhere after this. People don't just disappear. The clerk shrugged. You think she left town? Ethel's gut said no. She wouldn't have left Amara behind if she was running far. She was still here, somewhere, hiding. And Ethel was going to find her. A desperate call for help. By the time Ethel and Carter returned to the station, she was exhausted but more determined than ever. She pored over maps of Rosewood, marking motels, shelters, bus stations, anywhere Amara's mother might have gone. It was past midnight when her desk phone rang. She nearly ignored it. Then she saw the caller ID. Vlokikiti Nambir. A chill crept up her spine. She snatched up the receiver. Officer Davis. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a shaky, breathless voice. Is my daughter safe? Ethel's heart slammed against her ribs. It was her. Amara's mother. Ethel's grip tightened on the phone. Yes, she's safe. Where are you? Another pause. Then, a choked sob. I can't. They're watching me. If they know I called. Who's watching you? Ethel pressed. Tell me who they are. The woman's breathing grew shakier. Then whispers. You don't understand. It's not just them. It's the people they work for. They'll do anything to get her back. They think she belongs to them. Ethel's stomach dropped. A child. A mother running. A group trying to claim Amara as theirs. What the hell was she up against? Then, the woman's voice lowered to a terrified whisper. Officer, you need to listen to me. No matter what happens, do not let them take my daughter. Before Ethel could respond, the line went dead, and the silence that followed was the loudest sound in the world. The final stand. The dial tone hummed in Ethel's ear, hollow and final. The woman was gone, vanished back into the shadows, just like she had 3 nights ago when she left Amara behind. Ethel slammed the phone down, her pulse thundering in her veins. Damn it. Carter looked up from his desk. That was her, wasn't it? Ethel nodded sharply, rubbing a hand over her face. She's terrified. And she's not just running from some thug. This goes deeper than that. Carter frowned. What do you mean? Ethel's jaw clenched as she replayed the woman's words in her mind. It's not just them. It's the people they work for. They think she belongs to them. A fresh wave of unease settled over her. This wasn't just a missing persons case. It wasn't just a mother running from an abusive past. Amara wasn't just any child. And whoever these people were, they would do anything to get her back. The truth in the files. Ethel couldn't sleep. She sat in the cold glow of the station's records room, flipping through child protection reports, custody battles, anything that could point her toward the truth. But no matter how deep she dug, she came up with nothing. No birth certificate. No hospital records. No past addresses. No official proof that Amara or her mother had ever existed. It didn't make sense. Every child had some record. Even people on the run left paper trails. But this was intentional. Someone had erased them. A silent warning. At 4:13 a.m., Ethel finally pushed back from her desk, exhaustion heavy in her bones. She stepped outside for some fresh air, breathing in the crisp night breeze. The station parking lot was nearly empty, just her cruiser and a couple of late-shift patrol cars. She reached into her pocket for a cigarette. It was a bad habit, one she rarely indulged anymore. But tonight, she needed something to calm her nerves. She flicked open her lighter. And then she saw it. A white envelope, tucked neatly under her windshield wiper. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't heard anyone approach, hadn't seen a single soul walk past. Heart hammering, Ethel yanked it free and ripped it open. Inside was a single photograph. Amara. She was sleeping peacefully in the station's break room, curled up under the blanket Ethel had given her. The angle of the photo told her everything she needed to know. Someone had been inside the police station, watching them. And they had left this as a warning. Ethel's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a game anymore. They were already too close. She sprinted back inside, her boots slamming against the linoleum floors as she ran toward the break room. She threw open the door and froze. The blanket was rumpled, the chair empty. Amara was gone. The race against time. Ethel's world blurred into a storm of movement. She slammed the station alarm. The entire building came alive, officers rushing from their desks, voices shouting, radios crackling. Carter was at her side in seconds, his face twisted in shock. What the hell is going on? Ethel shoved the photo into his hand. They were here, inside the station, and they took her. The words burned in her throat. She had promised Amara she'd keep her safe. And now, she was gone. No, not on her watch. Ethel turned to the nearest officer. I want roadblocks set up at every major exit out of town. No vehicles leave without being checked. She turned to another. Get me security footage. Every single second from the past 3 hours. Find out how the hell they got inside. She turned to Carter. I need Reynolds and a team. We're moving. Carter didn't argue. Where? Ethel's jaw tightened. We're going back to where this started. The motel. If Amara's mother is still in town, she's the only one who knows how to stop this. They had to find her. Now. Because if they didn't, Amara would disappear forever. The motel raid. By the time Ethel and her team stormed into the Bluebird Motel, the sun was beginning to rise. She didn't bother knocking. She kicked open room 12's door, gun drawn, pulse hammering. The room was empty. No signs of struggle. No signs of Amara's mother. Just silence. Carter cursed under his breath. She's gone. But Ethel's gut told her differently. Her eyes scanned the room, looking for anything, any clue. And then she saw it. A small folded note tucked under the room's cheap lamp. She snatched it up, her fingers shaking as she read. Meet me at the train station. Come alone. The final choice. By the time Ethel arrived at the train station, the place was nearly deserted. But standing on the platform, hidden beneath the hood of a tattered gray jacket, was Amara's mother. Ethel walked up slowly, her hands open. I know who you are. And I know you're running. The woman flinched but didn't run. Her eyes, ***, the same dark brown as Amara's, ***, were filled with fear and exhaustion. But she wasn't just scared. She was done running. Where's my daughter? She whispered. Ethel's chest ached. She was taken. A sharp, broken gasp tore from the woman's lips. She stumbled back, her hand covering her mouth. No, 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 no. Ethel grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. We can still get her back. But I need you to tell me the truth. Right now. The woman's eyes glistened with tears. Then, finally, she broke. They want Amara because she's not mine. Ethel's breath caught. What? The woman wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. I stole her. You what? Her voice cracked as she spoke. I stole her from them. From the people who owned her. She was never my child. Ethel's stomach twisted violently. Who are they? She demanded. The woman swallowed hard. A private organization. They take children, train them, sell them. Her hands clenched into fists. Amara was one of them. I took her and ran. But they never stopped looking for her. Ethel felt her world shift beneath her. This wasn't just a kidnapping. This was human trafficking, and Amara was the key to something much bigger than either of them had realized. Ethel's fingers tightened around her gun. Then we end this. Because if those people thought they were getting Amara back, they were about to learn the hard way. They had just stolen the wrong child, and Officer Ethel Davis wasn't about to let them win.